What's up everyone? Today I have quite possibly one of the worst builds I have ever invented, and it's going to be utilizing the new Andrewsarchus pet. It's a tier 4 pet with a very interesting ability that we will hopefully get to see pretty soon into the game. But for those of you who do not know what it is, it's going to be swallowing the pet right below it in the shop, and therefore it's going to absorb half of its stats at level 1 but up to 150% of its stats at level 3, but for a single turn. So you can make some pretty funny builds with it, you can find some pretty fun combos to make it work. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be combining it with the Nordic goats, which when you buy one, the other one gets a massive stat increase in the shop. So you can probably tell where the build is going, but for now we will try to survive the early game as we pick up a double weasel plus a hedgehog and love potion combo. I think this is very secure. It's going to help us draw quite a bit, and that will make us therefore reach the middle game with relative ease. I say that, but yet we lose right here, and I believe we're actually going to go on a little bit of a losing streak, which is a little bit unfortunate, but the power of this awful build, I suppose, is what is going to be bringing us back from the brink. Here I am rolling for level ups, particularly more hedgehogs, which finally we do get to find one, so we're going to take it. We can't really find any weasels because it is a tier 3 pet, so it wasn't really available for a level up. But here we go, because we picked up the extra hedgehog, we managed to secure a draw right here. Ideally you would like to have a level up by this point, because both the Andrewsarchus and the Nordic goats are tier 4. And we do thankfully hit a level up in the weasel, but unfortunately it's neither of the pets we are looking for. Instead we find the deer, which is going to be very strong in the early mid game. It's going to be helping us combat some enemy summons like you can see right here. I still don't think it's going to be strong enough, unfortunately, as they are going to spawn a zombie cricket and claim a victory. But I am feeling relatively safe, especially when we have 0 wins. It means that we're going to be facing off against some pretty weak looking opponent teams, and hopefully that's going to be good enough to keep us in the game for a little while. Here we see a team that is nothing but stats, and we're just barely going to draw with it thanks to the deer spawning a very powerful boss with a chili. And now we have finally made it to the most important tier of the game, tier 4, where both the Andrewsarchus that we're going to pick up right here as well as the Nordic goats reside. And very luckily we managed to find a copy of each. So now that we have found the white goat, it's going to be scaling up the brown goat in the shop. So our game plan is going to be to continue stacking up white goats until we get hopefully a 50-50 brown goat in shop. I think this is a very funny team that's going for a treasure chest build, and very sadly we're actually going to end up losing to it because Platypus is just that strong. Or I suppose it's maybe our fault for being so weak, but at least we find some very good compensation in the shop. We get a crow to get a half level on the Nordic goat, and then we can purchase the other copy in the shop to get some +6/+6 scaling on the brown goat starting from now. It's very important to get the white goat up to level 2 as soon as possible, because that also makes waffles twice as efficient. The sooner we can get that 50-50, the better it's going to be for us. This turn we're not even utilizing the ability of Andrew, just because I wanted to have the highest attack up front, and hopefully that pays dividends for us. The great one from the bad dog actually being the MVP right now, holding us together as we get our first victory right here. Hopefully we start finding some brown goats that we can potentially feed to Andrew as we get him up to level 2. At level 2, he will be able to absorb 100% of the stats of the pet that it's going to swallow, and thankfully we find a brown goat right here so we can experiment with the combo for the first time. We're going to swallow the 16-16, giving us a massive buff, shooting us up to 24-20 in stats, and hopefully that is going to be good enough for us to claim our second victory. Just barely by the sheer amount of stats that we ingested right there, we managed to survive, which I think that round by itself made it this build entirely worth it in my eyes. But we're not done yet. We want to make 50-50 brown goats for the Andrew to swallow. So we're going to keep feeding waffles to the Nordic goat. Hopefully we find some more copies. If we can manage to get it up to level 3, that would expedite the process even more. Here on the final row we managed to find yet another brown goat, so we're going to be swallowing that. 36-32 stat line this time. But we don't have the great one this time around, so I think we're overall a little bit weaker and we're indeed going to end up losing. So now we're down to 1 heart. And we are overall in a very tough spot right now. No tempo, no scaling. The only scaling we have is circumstantial if we manage to find the brown goats in the shop, which is at this point quite unlikely, to be honest with you, as we have unlocked tier 6 pets, diluting the pool of pets even further. But that will not make us any less determined, as we find yet another brown goat in the shop right here. I think this one we will bring onto the team. And at this point you can probably start to realize what makes this build so horrible. Instead of us stacking 40 pets onto the team that we can keep permanently, we just keep consuming them with Andrew and wasting their potential just for a single turn of a little bit of extra stats. Not worth it at all. You would be much better off just playing the Nordic goats normally and then getting some competitors in order to transform them into something stronger. But here we go, yet another victory that the Andrew manages to snatch up for us. We have also managed to find a Yeti, which is going to make it a lot easier for us to scale up the goats. It will also make it a lot easier for us to find the brown goats that we can hopefully bring into the team and potentially swallow with Andrew as well. I think on this turn, if we get a little bit unlucky, which apparently is what happens, we are not even going to find a brown goat despite the many rolls that we managed to spend. So we are ultimately a lot weaker than we were last turn. And by a sheer miracle we just barely managed to survive right there, just because we are having such a bad track record with wins and hearts remaining that we actually face off against relatively weak looking opponents as well. Hopefully on this turn at least we do start finding some goats. We find another white goat, which I think is going to be worthwhile to take because we are still not up to 50-50 stats with the brown goat. And hopefully by the end of this turn we manage to find a brown goat to either purchase or swallow. We are going to sell the oyster, and hopefully with this final roll we do manage to find one, which we thankfully do. So we're going to bring it in this time. We're not going to be swallowing it because I don't want to risk not finding another brown goat again. And at this point I believe the white goat has served its purpose, so we can sell it and pivot into maybe 5 of a kind brown goat, but ideally I want to keep the Andrew on the team for as long as possible, maybe until the end of the game even. So we get a very decisive win right there, he says, as he is barely surviving. I don't think there's any merit to getting that level 3 white goat as we discussed. So we're going to sell out of it, we're going to bring in yet another oyster. The more oysters we can find the better, because it gives us more opportunities to roll and therefore find more brown goats, which we thankfully do right here. But now that we have begun stacking the team with brown goats, we can actually start swallowing once again with the Andrewsarchus. Unfortunately not this turn, as we have not managed to find anything. But thankfully this level 2 weasel can help out a bit by giving us 2 extra gold that we can potentially transform into 50-50 brown goats if we can manage to find them in the shop. So yeah, the Andrewsarchus right now quite useless as it gets sniped, and just barely we managed to win once again just because we have multiple 50-50s at this point. But I promise you, the Andrewsarchus will come back to being useful relatively shortly, maybe even by the end of this term. We find yet another 50-50 which we're going to be purchasing instead of the weasel. And hopefully at this point we're just going to be relying on some luck to find naturally a lot of golds that we can swallow with Andrew. As we find one right here. It's very tricky, by the way. You have to remember every turn to position Andrew right above the pet that you want to swallow. So we move it up to 3rd position so we can get those delicious 50-50 stats. And maybe we can see Andrew fight this time, as we curiously enough managed to face off against a fellow Andrew enjoyer and we get to destroy him. So yeah, I think at this point the build is basically complete. We're relying on luck to find golds every time, every single turn, which thankfully we do on this turn. I don't think we can afford to stack the 50-50 onto the 38-38 because we really desperately need the stats from the Andrewsarchus. Here I am trying to transform, hoping to see some good pets out of the transformation. We get a flounder, which is not going to be useful to us at all, but we're going to keep on trying. I believe I have a couple of useful tier 5 pets and a couple of useful tier 4 pets as well. So this hugely statted team that has been using Leviathan plus Bird of Paradise plus Ammonite, or Anemone I believe it's called actually, we managed to defeat relatively easily just because we have the large stat advantage. We're going to pick up a Peterbird, which we're going to put on one of the goats. We have a very comfortable swallow at the end of the turn, so hopefully if we manage to find some extra we will be safe for the next turn as well, and thankfully we do. So we can even move the Andrewsarchus one step forward, even maybe several steps forward, as we get yet another one in 2nd position. So now we can get to swallow, we can get to see Andrew fight once more and hopefully win. At this time our team is relatively strong, almost full 50-50, but do remember that we have 0 equipment, 0 in-battle abilities, and it is also turn 17, so it's very easy for us to get defeated. Not by this team though, as we managed to win over them, and I believe we're coming up on the final turn. So now finally we get to stack the goats on top of each other, getting that full 50-50 team. Once the Andrew has its last meal, of course. But for the end of the run, I believe I'm going to be using this water view, which is going to end up being very crucial to our victory actually. So at the end it was very much luck relying that we got this over the line, but I really hope that you enjoyed regardless. I'm taking a quick look at the pack just to see what I would like, and I decided to transform a tier 4 pet, which is going to transform into a deer. So this will be it for the run. I really hope you enjoyed this terrible run, and if you did, I really hope that you like, sub, do all the generic stuff, and I will talk to you next time. Take care.